Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Discovery Debrief, a podcast that dives headfirst into the proverbial deep end of the latest trek into the final frontier, Star Trek Discovery. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I'm joined by our bold panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Hello.
Zaki Hasan.
Howdy.
And Cicero Holmes.
I'm going. Get off my ass. Sir, get off my ass, sir.
Oh, man. Excellent. Well, so this is kind of a bittersweet episode in the sense that we have now absorbed every episode of Discovery's second season, and there's a whole lot to discuss in terms of where this episode took us, what things we saw as we get ready to gear up for a huge change to the show's status quo in the upcoming third season. And hopefully we can even get into some nerdy talk about the hue of some railing we saw on the bridge of some ship. How about that? Of course, though, we're going to ease into our news and episode discussions by talking about what everyone has been up to since the last time we all got together. Zaki, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I watched the first 5 minutes of All Good Things, and then we watched like the teaser of the episode, and then something happened, and now we're just waiting to get back to it. So,
okay.
All Good Things have not quite come to an end just yet. So we're getting there.
Yeah,
I really am straining. It's like that's by accident, but it's taken so long just to finish Next Generation. I think on an unconscious level, if I watch that final episode, then it's done.
But in a weird way, you're going to be preparing yourself for the next appearance of Jean-Luc Picard.
That's true. The next Generation.
Right, yeah. So just for a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, we actually did try and get together last week to record this episode, but some technical difficulties on my part prevented us from moving forward with that discussion. So we've reconvened, but Zaki has resumed his fabled broadcast order rewatch of the Star Trek franchise and was going to watch All Good Things, but
yeah,
here we are.
I did watch the retrospective that they aired just before All Good Things aired back in 1994.
Yeah,
which I didn't realize is on Netflix, and so I was like, "Man, last time I saw that was 25 years ago."
It's kind of a weird inclusion, isn't it?
It is weird. I'm glad they have it.
Sure,
and it's crazy because I remember it so distinctly. I remember Jonathan Frakes as the host being so hammy and Frakesy, and I loved it, and I loved watching it with my boys. I mean, I always say, like, for me, this journey through the final frontier that I'm going on is a brand new thing for me because it's the first time I'm doing it as a dad, and I get to. And Mike, I mean, when you think about it, my oldest is 12, so he's not that much younger than I was when Next Generation ended, which is very surreal when I think about it.
Right.
So that's the fun of it for me, and I've been watching Discovery with them too, by the way, so they've been enjoying that.
Oh, cool. Well,
yeah.
So when you guys do get through All Good Things, then you put the whole rewatch on hold, so you're going to jump back into DS9.
Jump back in. That's the goal. Chronological. When we get to Voyager, we'll get there. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It sounds awesome. Well, I'm glad that that's something that we get to talk about with you on the journey going forward.
Nice.
Cicero, what have you been up to, man?
Well, so I am doing the journey backwards. I have not gotten into DS9 yet, because I've been all about, I've reached the end game, guys. I reached the end game.
Yeah.
So, so I've only kind of consumed that once, but between that and Game of Thrones, it's just a lot to consume. The plan is definitely to go back and watch both of those things again. With regards to Trek, speaking of Star Trek Next Generation, I am watching the spiritual successor to Next Generation, which is the brilliant now Orville. The Orville. And I have yet to watch the season finale. I'm happy to report that it has been picked up for a third season. Or at least that is heavily rumored that it has been picked up for a third season. So hopefully, that rumor turns out to be true. Man, the show is incredible. It is, they have really, really done a great job of, scratching that TNG itch, and have now evolved into kind of its own thing, still in that, but still giving you that same flavor of TNG with a little bit of Seth MacFarlane thrown in for a good measure. But the stories are really, really good.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with Rachel and I watched the season finale. What was it? Just like a few days ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I was pretty. The idea of they introduced the idea that's the impetus for the season finale at the end of the penultimate episode.
Sure. Okay.
And it's a pretty without giving anything away, I think that it used a relatively traditional Star Trek trope in telling a story that could really only be told on the Orville with these characters. And there's some surprises along the way. So I'll be interested to know what you think once the finale actually takes place in your living room, Cicero.
Right. Absolutely. I'll be more than happy to report.
Yeah, excellent. And Rachel, you like that show overall now that you've seen the whole second season?
Yeah, I do like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too Seth MacFarlane.
Which is a weird thing to say, kind of.
Yeah, it's very hard sci-fi. I like it. It's good.
Yeah. Well, before I tell everyone what we were up to, what have you been up to, Rachel, since the last time we got together to record
All
this?
I can think of is work stuff, Chris.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I don't know. What have I been up to? We went to Star Wars Celebration, and we have a fun story to tell about that. But before we tell it, I would just like to say that I feel I have misjudged Star Wars fans as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I got an impression of what that fandom was like from the internet, and I think there's just a few thousand kind of loud, annoying people, and everyone else is super great, because Star Wars Celebration was just like, everyone there was like so cool and so positive and was doing amazing cosplays of like beyond the quality of anything I've ever seen. Just so great.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really made me reflect on how the internet can make you think that things that are a minority opinion are, everything just because they're the loudest.
Yeah.
And
so true.
The reality is that most people are cool people. So
yeah, I mean, I was literally in the same room with Kathleen Kennedy multiple times at Celebration and did not hear anything cross from the pretty big audiences that I was assembled with, where she made an appearance. And I expected to, but you're absolutely right. Those minorities, when they get on their megaphones, just drown stuff out. I mean, you were kind of afraid to go.
Yeah,
man, hold on. That was a soundbite that will keep you from running for office. Those minorities, when they're on those megaphones.
Oh, well, oh, good God.
Can you repeat that? He then said those minorities. He then repeated those minorities.
Oh, no. See, this
context is king, man.
Context is for kings. Oh, dear God. The minority crazy Star Wars fans,
right wing,
who lean on alt-right principles, who would say things like the thing I just said, apparently. Oh my God!
Context.
Yeah, in a much different context, I assure you. But no,
I think, Chris, just to pick up on what you're saying, and you guys were there, but seeing online the rapturous reception that Ahmed Best got, that Kelly Tran got,
yes,
it was really heartening to me, especially knowing what we've heard recently about how Ahmed Best was driven to contemplate suicide because of people shitting all over Jar Jar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrifying, you know?
I was in the room for that panel. I went to the Wintrust Arena specifically for the Phantom Menace panel, which was packed to the gills on a Monday morning.
Wow.
Which it's the Star Wars celebration, sure, but still, it's a movie that is often derided, and it had just they kicked off that panel by showing the Phantom Menace trailer that people went to theaters to watch back in was it 1998, and just a rapturous applause, raucous reactions from the crowd, and yes, absolutely, when Ahmed Best was introduced, it got really loud in the Wintrust Arena, and deservedly so. And the only message that was recorded by the Papa of Star Wars, George Lucas, was played for the Phantom Menace panel attendees. And I felt in a weird way, I felt kind of honored to be there because he was talking to the people who do enjoy that movie a lot. And he even said Jar Jar is still his favorite Star Wars character in that recorded message.
So up yours, all you guys.
Right, exactly.
But he also said that he loved each and every one of us. And of course, it's a recorded message, but I had a hard time not believing him because we were all assembled to celebrate the Phantom Menace's 20th anniversary again on a Monday morning.
Right. Well, then he put on his monocle and he dove into his money bin.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. He's not going to give.
Well, Chris, let me ask you something. You were what, like 10 when Phantom Menace came out?
Yeah, thereabouts. 11. Yeah.
So what did you think of it?
When I watched it at the time, it was made for me.
Yeah.
I liked it when I saw it. A lot.
That's my thought. Is like, time has proved him right.
It has. Well, and that's the thing is that, so at the time, it was clearly made for my age group. It was also a cultural event that was really easy to get caught up in. So I appreciated it for that. But then as time has gone on and as a 31-year-old man now, the thing that I appreciate about the Phantom Menace and the prequels at large was that it was telling a political story. I'm a political science graduate, and stories of descents into tyrannical rule usually begin with a boring political issue like a trade dispute, and the prequel trilogy follows that kind of trajectory, and it tells a story pretty brilliantly. When you take a look at the rise of Palpatine and the rise of the Empire and the political machinations that he was putting into play and trying to pit certain powers against each other before he seizes his opportunity by starting a war to consolidate power under his sole rule, that's a pretty compelling story. People just get distracted by the inclusion of Jar Jar. But I'll tell you, I don't hate Jar Jar. And everything that they did with Jar Jar in the Clone Wars only solidifies that he's actually a pretty interesting character. So maybe people will burn me enough for saying that who listen to this show. But
burn the witch,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I will just say, guys, imagine if the internet existed when Return of the Jedi released in 1983, because there were enough grown men who loved A New Hope, who loved Empire, who were grown men and watching Ewoks, and the fact that Luke Skywalker, spoiler alert, that Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa were brother and sister, were twin siblings. The vitriol that would have existed at that moment would have probably dwarfed the Jar Jar comments. My biggest beef was not Jar Jar and his quasi Sambo-ish manner of speaking, but the fact that Anakin Skywalker was essentially Jesus, and that that his mom was had some kind of midichlorian based immaculate conception that really kind of was like,
well, see,
guys,
this is one of the problems, and I don't want to delve too deeply into Star Wars.
It's too late. It's too late.
Prequel debrief.
Right, yeah, but one of the problems that I kind of have with the Star Wars universe in general is that it keeps a lot of really kind of important storytelling details that are retcons, I'll grant you, but still important, isolated to expanded universe material.
Yes.
Like character and the merchandising, because like merchandising is sometimes the most reliable source you can get for a character's name, which is really bizarre, and I think it's kind of unique to Star Wars. But I mean, expanded universe stories have done a really good job of fleshing out some of those moments that you saw in any of the movies. And it's kind of like the Tarkin book. I read the Tarkin book, which is technically canon, that was written by James Luceno. And it has some really fascinating details about Tarkin's backstory. The Catalyst Rogue One novel was really good. But yeah, that stuff just kind of gets lost in the expanded universe side of things, which is, you could argue, a shortcoming of the movies. But, it's kind of weird. Rachel mentioned the other day, 2019 is a year of endings. Because not only Game of Thrones, that's the last season, but we're also getting Avengers Endgame, which we'll talk about on this show. Spoiler alert, but we're planning to. And
not this episode.
Not this episode.
Is just the Star Wars.
Right. This is just the Star Wars episode, apparently. And the Rise of Skywalker. And I mean, kind of with Discovery, there's kind of an ending to it that we'll have to talk about, but. Let me put a pin in the Star Wars Celebration discussion with a story that you guys have heard, but that I am now finally getting the chance to tell our listeners about. So, Rachel and I Rachel's only day at the Star Wars Celebration was on Saturday, which was April the 12th. And there was a guest at the Star Wars Celebration that is relevant to this show's interest in the form of Mr. Jason Isaacs. And for those of you that don't know, Jason Isaacs voiced the Inquisitor on the first season of Star Wars Rebels, which is the Emperor's personal strike force to try and get rid of Jedi that survived Order 66. But of course, Jason Isaacs is Captain Lorca. How could you not know that? So Rachel and I decided that we would get an autograph from Jason Isaacs because it makes sense. What other opportunities are we going to get to meet him? And on a whim, I decided to bring my recorder along because as co-hosts of a Star Trek Discovery podcast, what are the chances that we would be able to talk to Captain Lorca? So Rachel and I get in line to get our item autographed by Mr. Isaacs. And as we're getting closer, I mean, I'm starting to get nervous. We get a little bit closer to his table, and there's a handler there who's kind of managing the line. And I kind of start talking to him, and I just kind of ask him, do you think that he might record something for me? And the guy says, I don't think so. I'm not going to tell you that you can't ask him, but I seriously doubt he's going to do it. And at that point, Rachel looks at me and says, don't do it. Don't do it.
I'm a very socially anxious person.
And so at this point, he is in view of us. And, when you see someone that you've, watched on a screen for a long time in real life, there's a very surreal kind of disconnect. So the blood's starting to pump into my brain, and I look over at Rachel, and she looks a little bit nervous, and she's just telling me that I should just not do it. And so within the span of probably like 90 seconds, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to do it. But what's the worst that could happen? So we get up to Jason Isaacs, who's just the coolest dude on the planet, I think is pretty safe to say. The item that we chose to have autographed was our Season 1 Steelbook of Discovery. And I saw tons of people with Star Wars stuff, obviously. I saw quite a few people with Harry Potter-oriented stuff because he played Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies. I didn't see anybody else with Star Trek stuff. I mean, that doesn't mean that there weren't people there with Star Trek stuff. I just didn't see them.
There was nobody else. It was just you guys.
Perhaps not. But he starts looking through our Steelbook. It doesn't seem like he had ever seen it before. he seemed pretty interested in it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I mean, like he's thumbing through it and it's on, was it 4 discs? And he just goes, this is a little excessive. They stretched it out to 4 discs.
Oh, Chris, your British accent's real bad.
Oh, sorry. Apologies to anybody who.
That's excessive, isn't it?
I thought you were at a German castle looking for tapestries.
we saw Hamilton a couple weeks ago, so now I've got King George in my head. That's probably my problem. So a few minutes goes by. He starts to. We're talking a little bit, and I have my recorder in my pocket, and I bring it out, and I say, we actually host a Star Trek Discovery podcast. Would it be possible for you to record a plug for us? And instantly, the person, what was it, to his right?
Yeah, it was like a handler or producer person.
Yeah, she just goes, no. And he seems very apologetic. He says, I'm sorry, the promoters, they frown on that kind of thing. And
I'll get in trouble with the promoters.
Yeah. He says he'll get in trouble. But then he asks, what's your show? And I tell him it's called Discovery Debrief. And to my shock and amazement, and Rachel's too, I'm sure, he goes, oh, I've listened to that one.
And I think my eyes were now half of my face.
Right. So, I mean, I have no idea if that's true, obviously, but even if it's not true.
Are you calling Jason Isaacs a liar? I say we take him at his word.
I'm just saying that there's no way I could verify that was true.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for listening.
The man's a Starfleet captain, damn it.
That's right.
But even if it's not true, that is a really cool thing to say. He didn't have to say that. And if he has listened to the show, how amazing is that Captain Lorca and maybe potentially other members of the show that we profile has actually listened to what we have to say about it.
Yeah.
And then after he says that, it's a little bit of a blur in my head. But he gets up from his chair and he walks behind the curtain and he gestures toward us to follow him. So Rachel and I kind of awkwardly climb between the tables of his autograph stand and move quickly behind the curtain. And then this happened.
Are you listening to Discovery Debrief? And so did I. It's Jason Isaacs, who was, at some point, some version of Captain Lorca. Right now, I'm just a fan.
Thank you so much.
Sweet.
That was amazing. Amazing. And thanks, guys. We're out.
Yeah, I know.
Right, yeah.
See you next season.
I mean, if I hadn't recorded that, I don't think it wouldn't have actually happened. Like I can't actually make the connection that he was that awesome. So, Mr. Isaacs, if you're listening to this, thank you so much for doing that. You made our year, I think, and you have nothing but admiration and appreciation from the crew of Discovery Debrief. That is a singularly defining moment that I've had at any convention that I've gone to. And, and I've said this before to you guys, but I'll say it again. You know how they say, don't meet your heroes, meet your villains.
There you go.
Hashtag Lorca lives.
Yes.
And I told him I hope so. But that's actually going to be a topic of discussion that we'll get into.
He lives in the year 3000.
Yeah, well. So let's move along to the reason that we're here, our discussion for Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episodes 13 and 14, called Such Sweet Sorrow. So what I'm going to do a quick and dirty recap. I'm just going to read through the plot very quickly of both episodes because this is going to be kind of a free-form conversation. So, Part 1. Discovery escapes and rendezvous with the Enterprise, with Discovery evacuated onto the other starship. From there, they initiate the self-destruct mechanism for Discovery, but the sphere data takes control of Discovery's systems and prevents this from happening. It also defends itself from torpedoes. Burnham proposes that the time crystal be used to take Discovery itself to the future, where Control cannot get to it, planning to wear a copy of her mother's suit to lead the ship there. Pike agrees and resumes command of the Enterprise to keep Control distracted. A new signal appears, leading Discovery and the Enterprise to the planet Zahia, which is ruled by Tilly's friend, Queen Mehani Ikahali Kapo, or Poe. A brilliant engineer, Poe assists Stamets, Tilly, and Reno with preparing the suit and time crystal for the journey. A few of the Discovery's crew, as well as Spock and Georgiou, choose to stay with Burnham. Pike makes Saru acting captain of Discovery, and as the Section 31 fleet arrives, Discovery prepares to make the jump into the future. That's part 1. In part 2, Tyler retrieves the Klingon fleet to assist in the battle, while Sarana arrives with the Kelpians in Baul fighters after receiving a farewell message from Saru. Stamets is seriously injured and is cared for by Dr. Culber. The Section 31 torpedo penetrates the Enterprise without detonating, but a secondary detonation kills Admiral Cornwell after she seals off the surrounding area. Leland, controlled by Control, boards Discovery and is defeated by Georgiou with magnetism, allowing Section 31's fleet to be destroyed. In the suit, Burnham travels to the past and sets the 5 signals that led them to this point. She then sets a 6th for Discovery to follow as she travels into the future and promises to set a 7th when they safely arrive there. The crew of the Enterprise tells Starfleet that Discovery was destroyed in the battle and are ordered to never speak of Discovery or its crew again, on Spock's recommendation to prevent another incident like the one that happened with Control. Tyler is placed in command of Section 31, and months later, the Enterprise detects the 7th signal as it sets course for a new adventure. So, a lot to take in, and something that completely changes the potential status quo for what we know is coming in season 3. Zaki, this 2-part season finale, what did you think, and what do you think of the way that it's setting the show up for the future?
I mean, so many amazing moments. I think the first season of this show was a bit of a shakedown cruise. It had to sort of justify its existence, and I think this second season has really been for those people who were willing to not be sort of indentured to a specific vision of what Star Trek is supposed to look like. It's rewarded their viewing, sevenfold. It's done so much right, and we can get into the weeds and quibble about certain ways that it attempts to tie up canon, but I think the mere fact that the show and the showrunners did use this season finale to say, yes, we are making a good faith effort to make this fit with everything we've seen before, that shows that they do care. Mm-hmm. So that complaint, these people don't care about Star Trek, that's demonstrably not true, because just look at the characterizations that we've seen. Look at the moral quandaries that our characters have been faced with. This is Star Trek to its very core. It's about exactly this, about the type of person you want to be, and modeling what it means to live in Gene Roddenberry's conception of the future.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. And are you able to make a determination about whether or not you enjoyed season 2 more than season 1?
I absolutely did, without a question. And I liked season 1, just to be very clear. But to me, this was next level, and I fully admit, and you guys know this because I've been on a Pike high for the whole season. It's like a good 30% of that is just Anson Mount all by his lonesome. Mm-hmm. I don't want to imagine there not being more adventures of Anson Mount as Christopher Pike. Like, just thinking of that makes me sad. That being said, I think the fact that Discovery is now off in Star Trek's truly uncharted future, that makes me excited. So it's this mixture of sadness and excitement, which to some extent I would imagine is what the characters in the show are feeling. Sure. So it is appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Cicero, you had expressed some nervousness previously about whether or not the season finale was going to be able to stick the landing. Did 2 parts help, and did it? And what did you think of it?
Yeah, they even got a 9.8 from the German judge. So they really did it. It was a brilliant stroke, and kind of to piggyback off of what Zaki was saying about people kind of being I don't know, bullheaded in their commentary about canon and the writer's inability to make all of the history make sense. The thing that I had been preaching throughout the course of the season, the thing that I felt confident in saying early, and the thing that I felt consistently, they made me seem even more wise than I already believed myself to be throughout the course of the season. Was these guys understood the canon, they were aware of the canon, and as they were making the decisions that they were making, they were fully cognizant of where they were and how to make all of that stuff fit within the auspices of this, sacrosanct canon, the dogma that is Star Trek, especially in this era of the TOS era of the Federation and of Star Trek lore. And they did a brilliant job of that. And again, was able to, within a couple of lines, explain all of the things that would have led you, that people had questions about. Why don't we know about the Discovery? Why don't we know about the Spore Drive? Why haven't we heard of Michael Burnham? Why haven't we done, why doesn't Spock ever talk about his sister? All of those things, all of those questions were answered very easily. It was the epilogue of the episode. And within the epilogue of the episode, all of those questions were answered definitively, in such a way that I don't think that anyone who was watching and had those questions was dubious of their ability to kind of get themselves out of that spider web. I think all of those questions were answered, and they did it, incredibly well. The casting, the main crew, of course, has been great. Anson Mount, man, I am so glad that I've seen him in something other than the worst show that was ever created. Inhumans. I'm glad I actually get to hear him speak, because he was really great. I'm glad that, and it's funny because I came out famously and said it has to be, we have to have oh crap, why can't I think of his name now, who played Spock in the movies? Quinto. Yeah, we had to get Zach Quinto. It has to be Zach Quinto. And and the fact that we wound up with Ethan Peck instead, initially I wasn't all that enthused. I did want to take a wait and see kind of attitude about it. And Ethan Peck didn't disappoint. Anson Mount didn't disappoint. And even the best part was the entire season, Ethan Peck as Spock was bearded until the very end of the season. And then we got to see the Spock that we know and love. And he fit there as well.
Right.
And so, I mean, just brilliant. There are a bunch of brilliant and thoughtful people in the writer's room. There are a bunch of brilliant and thoughtful people in the casting room. And there are a ton of brilliant and thoughtful and caring and good people within the cast. And it just oozes out of the TV screen.
Very well said. Rachel, the season finale of Star Trek Discovery Season 2. What did you make of it? Did it stick the landing for you?
8 out of 10.
Okay.
I really liked everything that happened. There was a lot of stuff that I maybe was a little bit fan servicey, but I am a fan and I felt serviced.
Mm-hmm.
I was happy. Like when Laurel said, perhaps today is a good day to die.
That was a pretty good moment.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was cool. I think, my quibbles come from perhaps some structural issues with the way that they broke up the two episodes, the two parts. I felt like the first part was a bit slow and the second part was like blow your hair back, like too much is going on. This is not a new critique on my part.
Right.
That there's a lot of I don't know why you're pacing it how you're pacing it, but it didn't really diminish my enjoyment that much. Yeah, I think there's a few plot points when I thought about them more didn't maybe entirely hold up to scrutiny. What's coming to mind is the Discovery just refuses to self-destruct itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we don't know this till it's already all happening. I feel like there's maybe they could have tried a little bit harder to explain that, but again, I don't think that necessarily took away from my enjoyment of the episode or of the season. I think that it, emotionally hit all the beats that I wanted to see or experience.
Huh. Yeah, I do want to kind of say, kind of piggyback off of what Rachel is saying is, and that, especially in the last two episodes, especially once we all kind of had a sense that time was running out, that they're running out of time to tell the story. They were coming up with solutions that were very sciencey because science. And that was, and that's how they were doing it. And it was just, at those points, and again, I will defer to Rachel when it comes to all of that stuff, because she's the expert in the field, especially here.
All sciences.
Yes, all sciences, all of them, geology. But the fact is that even I was watching them and listening to it, and I was like, this is very hokey, but I'll give you a pass because you've got to just make things work, right? Yeah. So all right, fine. As long as it follows whatever goofy rules you guys are setting up within your universe, then just go ahead and do it. I don't know that they actually did, but it was okay, let's go. We've got a job to do, and we're not going to let science and explanations and logic get in the way of that.
Yeah. Yes. I think I have a continuous debate with myself over how much is totally unbelievable science a problem for me in shows, and I don't have a hard and fast rule. It's just I know when something that I'm watching it's bothering me, and I know when it isn't bothering me, and I don't know if I could tell you when it does and when it doesn't bother me. And in this episode there was a few things that bothered me after the fact, but during it I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I guess Michael can't go to the future till she's gone to the past for reasons.
Right.
I mean, at that point, it's well, time travel is, not real, so you just make up whatever rules you want. That's fine. The worst example of this I can think of is not a Star Trek thing. It's in Amazing Spider-Man when they have the trans-species genetics, and that somehow putting animal DNA in you makes you into that animal, and I'm but that's directly my field, and I'm sorry guys, but we're doing trans-species genetics all the time, and nothing's changing into anything else. That's not how it works. We all have the same DNA.
And that is the worst problem with The Amazing Spider-Man. Other than that.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, so I don't have hard and fast rules, but sometimes things just bother the hell out of me.
Can I just pick up on something Rachel just said? I think I can draw a corollary to Avengers Endgame, which I'm assuming we'll at some point spend more time talking about. But both this finale and that finale both involve a lot of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. But they also involve culminating in something very emotionally satisfying. And in both of these instances, that was where I landed, where I was like, I can totally get lost in the weeds on how the time travel is making my brain turn into pudding. But I think both Discovery and Avengers stuck the landing in that they used the time travel aspect as a key part of the narrative, but it ultimately was about coming to a point at something that feels emotionally truthful. And that's what worked for me in both instances. Not contradicting anything Rachel said, but just sort of that's where my thought process went as I was listening.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's when it's used to further the narrative, and it doesn't get too crazy or bogged down in things. Yeah. It's effective. So I think there was also some, for me, a bit missed opportunities to sort of talk about Pike and his fate with the this situation with Admiral Cornwell and the missile or torpedo. Right. I think they really glossed over that in a really quick way, and I felt like it could have been explored a little bit more, because he could definitely change his fate right there. Like, no beep boop machine. You just get you just get exploded. And I think he's like, oh well, maybe if I stay in here, it won't happen. And I'm like,
but the Admiral said he's still got more to do.
Yeah, so. I don't know. Also, maybe the Federation should design explosion-proof doors with handles on both sides.
Well, this is how this is after this it occurs to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're like, damn.
It's like the Titanic and its watertight doors that are only watertight on the bottom.
It did take a fire on the command module before they realized that maybe the door should be opened on the inside.
There you go.
So right.
It's been 20 years and it is too soon.
Yeah, I will say that the Admiral Cornwell death was telegraphed in such a ham-fisted way. Like I knew it was coming for like 20 minutes, and that was
what was coming. I'm sorry, Cicero. I think
the Admiral Cornwell death. Sure. That was telegraphed. Just really, really, really poorly. But again, it was one of those things where, like, all right, I see this coming. Let's make it happen. Let's get it over with. I understand the emotional resonance that it's supposed to have. And like it's all in service of getting us to the end. So let's do it.
Yum, yum.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say to that.
Oh, all right. Well,
that piece of dialogue, by the way, is the literal worst I've ever heard in a Star Trek.
That was a weird moment. It really didn't fit with the tone of that. What? Did I imagine that?
You really didn't.
I've just been confirmed. I did not.
It's what she says. It's the way she says it. It's like you wonder, what direction was she given? How did they end up at that moment? Like I don't know. I started reverse engineering that back to the writer's room. Like somebody wrote that. Somebody gave it to the actress. Somebody directed her how to say it. How many takes did she say before they arrived at that one? So many
Editors
questions.
like looked at that final cut and thought it like was appropriate.
Right. Did you pull that out? Oh, damn it. Oh.
You put that back in.
Right.
Well, when it comes to my thoughts on the season finale, see, this is really unusual territory for me to be in.
Chris,
What?
agony booth. Chris is a hater.
Oh.
He's not.
Tell him why you mad, son.
Hate is too strong a word. I felt like this season finale had way too many similar problems compared with the last one. I mean, not that the way that this season culminated did not have a lot of emotionally satisfying moments or even canonically satisfying moments. It did, but I really thought that Cornwell's death was just unnecessary. I didn't see why that necessarily had to happen. Throwing in the Kelpians in the final battle seemed out of place to me.
They made a lot of progress.
Right, yeah. I mean, the last time we saw them, they were just sort of starting to come to terms with the idea that maybe their place in society is going to be completely different after they discover not only that they've been lied to, but there's a whole new biological reality that they have to contend with. You know, they thought that that was a death process when it was actually more just like a maturation process.
Maybe they are having a intense adolescence that involves hijacking Baul fighters and flying around.
Well, that's another thing too, right? I mean, and I know that I'm probably getting way too insular in looking at this, but they go from being theologically driven kelp farmers to competently flying alien fighter jets alongside Federation starships and Klingon starships. And that, for some reason, it was that moment that really just kind of took me out of it.
You don't remember the scene when they were at when they were, you know, dealing with the Kelpians, where they bullseyed womp rats with their
T-16s?
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, I must have missed that part.
Just like Gregor's Canyon back home.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And the Star Wars references just keep coming. But beyond that too, you know, I can't dispute any of what you guys are saying in terms of the fact that the writers clearly care about where to sort of nestle these episodes over the course of the first two seasons in a very specific spot in the canon. That's fine. I guess I just expected more from the rationale of how it would fit in and the method by which it fits in. Because it seemed, I don't know, it almost seems just dismissive. I don't really like the idea of these characters that we've spent 2 years getting to know so well being brushed under the rug and never being recognized for their contributions to the Federation. That, I mean, granted, the show is still going. We haven't seen the last of them. That much is very clear. We're getting a whole other season with these characters. But I don't know. I guess I just kind of feel a little bit weird about them not having that recognition. And honestly, while part of me does believe, yes, it's really exciting that we're pushing far beyond the bounds of where the canon lies and it can really chart new territory, another part of me just thinks that it's too far removed from the universe that we know. Like even the Next Generation being roughly, 70 years or so after where we saw the TOS crew by the time the sixth movie rolled around. It's close enough to have an impact on what we understand the Star Trek canon to be and the history of the Federation to be, but it's far enough that it gave them latitude to do pretty much whatever they want with entirely new species and situations and locations. And for some reason, I just kind of feel like taking things so far into the future is removing them way too much from the world that we know. Now, I'm not going to prejudge season 3 because there's a very good chance, considering the pedigree of this writer's room when they're in their element, that it could be phenomenal. And I'm fully hopeful that that's going to be the case. But I also am one of the Star Trek fans who believes that the continuity is one of its strengths. I like when things get kind of tied together. I mean, that can be an Achilles heel in some respect, but I also like the idea of having reverberating events that kind of echo across centuries that can connect the likes of Captain Archer with Captain Picard. You know, and granted, we haven't really seen too many exploitations in the modern age of Star Trek since the 21st century rolled around to connect them together, but the potential has always been there. And I feel like that potential is completely blown out of the water by pushing them, for all intents and purposes, a millennium into the future. So what I did love about this episode was getting a really cool opportunity for Discovery and the Enterprise to team up. I mean, if there's ever a single image that clearly demonstrates how much they are bear hugging the continuity, it is that. And seeing Captain Pike in his element on the Enterprise, seeing the Enterprise reimagined, period, was really emotional for me, surprisingly so. But I guess I'm just nervous about how this show is going to progress. Obviously, this is just the beginning of how CBS All Access is going to be leveraging the Star Trek franchise, potentially into things that have not yet been announced, hopefully a Pike show. But yeah, I don't know, guys. I was left a little bit cold at the end of this one, to be honest.
Well, I would say that part of that may have something to do with the way these seasons are narratively designed. You know, from the conclusion backwards. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that they knew this is where they wanted to end. They knew they wanted to go into the future, and that creates this, it creates this need to kind of do everything that they need to do to set that stuff up so that they can get to the end. But then again, like you said, much of the same issues that they had last season and the final couple of episodes of last season, I think they did suffer from that. And both you and Rachel, said that, where they just ran out of time, right, to really flesh out the things that they wanted, because they knew so like we can gloss over all the sciencey stuff and the timey-wimey stuff just because we know we need to get to this end point. Mm-hmm. And let's just get to the end point, and that's all that matters. Now, what I will say in regards to them going into the future is that it's probably the most Star Trek thing that they could do. Mm-hmm. Because it is, now we are entering as fans and as fans of this show and fans of this franchise, we are entering the final frontier. We are entering a completely undiscovered and unknown to us territory of space, time and space.
You might say an undiscovered country.
Yes, you might.
That's peace, Chris.
You could say if you were Chris Clow, but the fact is now we have got a blank canvas from which they can paint a picture with this show, with the characters that they, with the scenarios that they enter themselves into, with the dynamics that they have now, because, we as fans know of two beings potentially that exist in this time outside of that crew. One is Dr. Burnham, and the other is the dude from Calypso, Kraft, right? That's it. That's all we know. Right. And because
granted,
yeah, go ahead.
There's the potential too that there's now room for these characters to encounter other beings where time has no meaning.
Q
comes to mind,
right. Yes.
and the prophets honestly come to mind.
Sure.
And the prophets could even potentially. I would love to see the prophets re-explored in a future show, especially considering that time is a simplistic thing to be kind of looked down upon. So I'll grant you. I'll totally grant you that. I have no issue with anything that you just said.
Can I add something too? I think that as a concept, I would have been opposed to another Star Trek show if it was set this far ahead in the future. Just cold. I think what we're doing now with Discovery though is intriguing to me because you have a group of characters who are going to be on the exact same page as the audience, which is what is this unknown future? What does it offer us? And in essence, it's people from Star Trek's quote unquote present, which we all are familiar with, right? So we know the vernacular and just how things work in the 23rd century, and now they're forced to deal with whatever the hell things are like in the 32nd century or whatever it is. That's what makes it intriguing to me. So if this were like, oh, this is the USS whatever, and now we're just in this year, that would not be as fun to me. And that's something that the creators of Star Trek themselves have constantly pushed back on. Like at some point, you move so far ahead that just the human experience is not something we would be able to relate to that far along. So this is a good way of licking that problem because they've spent the first 2 years developing who these people are. We know them. We know their shorthand. We know their interaction. We know how the Discovery works. And we are now far enough ahead that you don't have to worry about like keeping your elbows close to your side so that you don't accidentally tip over something that's going to affect canon later. I mean, I think in many ways, and since we're doing like, Trek metaphors, it is the best of both worlds.
Nice. Well, and let me ask you this, Zaki, because as
he's in his b-boy stance.
How did you know?
Oh, that's good. Well, when it comes to the canon, and I guess repositioning Discovery in a place that is unexplored, do you find the idea of moving so far ahead more or less attractive than the idea of just maybe moving, I don't know, like let's say 10 years beyond where the Picard show is? Like, is that distance the thing that helps provide some of the value of this concept to you?
Yeah, I mean, they need a blank canvas, right? It doesn't make sense to me to put it close enough to because here's the thing: you have to imagine that the folks involved, everyone involved with Picard, etc. Picard is not the end of the road for whatever exploration they plan to do in the 24th/25th century. So why be boxed in potentially?
I see.
I think, when you talk about the fact that Next Generation was placed far enough ahead that it didn't bump up into anything that the original series stuff was going to do. The part of that's important though is that the original series era was basically over by the time Next Generation started. They were on the way out. You had 2 more movies, but there wasn't going to be much stuff coming, right? So it whereas now, again, however many seasons Patrick Stewart does, I'm fairly certain the assumption and the goal is to have that show be a launch point to something else. They've said they want Star Trek to be, an assembly line again. So it makes sense to me to say, all right, well, let's put Discovery down there. And nothing that Picard does will potentially bump up and have to be something the Discovery people have to worry about. Otherwise, they're just, the whole thing is they're trying to escape the shackles of continuity. It makes sense to me that, okay, well, they're giving themselves 1,000 years of runway or 800 years of runway, from post, Voyager and Picard, whatever. I mean, that's plenty of room to avoid anything that's going to come up. So, I think and again, they could completely shit the bed for all I know. I mean, we'll find out next year. But I'm definitely looking at it like, well, I see why they did it. I can appreciate the wisdom in how they've done it. Now let's see what they do with it.
Yeah, I think that's understandable. What do you think, Rachel?
Oh, I think Discovery is going to do some discovery.
Boom.
It truly is Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
I think I'm excited because they can do anything.
Yeah.
They can do anything that they want. And we're all assuming that they're gonna like stay in that time, but they still have like a time travel suit.
Right.
They could go other times. They could go wherever. They could go see Picard.
Mm-hmm.
Go hang out with him. So I think it's cool. I think it's filled with possibilities. And I'm gonna miss Spock and Captain Pike. And I'm gonna miss the little nods to continuity.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm mostly excited for what comes next.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So the question is, will you miss Captain Pike and Spock?
Yeah, I mean, that's worth talking about. I mean, Zaki alluded to the idea that CBS definitely wants to run with Star Trek on an ongoing basis. Right. If they want to keep that going, I mean, you guys saw the news the same way that I did, that now there's a Nickelodeon animated show coming, and it's probably not designed for us, but it's designed for creating new Star Trek fans.
Right.
Which I'm certainly all for. And hell, I'll watch it. I mean, they know me. It's like, hey, you nerd, you're going to watch this anyway, aren't you? You damn nerd. Here's some Star Trek, you little bastard. Here you go. That's what they're going to do. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it. But if there is anything that is just like made to order new ongoing Star Trek series, and you know, the thing that kind of clinched it for me, I found out that the Enterprise bridge set was not a redress. They actually built it on another stage. Right. Why would you do that if you're not going to use it again?
That's exactly right.
You know, I mean, it's just a money thing, right?
Right.
I'm surprised that they let that detail out into the public, to be honest. But I
mean, you could tell just from looking at the thing that they spent some money.
Well, let's get into that part of it a little bit. There we go. Yeah, start it over again.
It's pedantic continuity time.
Oh, I don't know if Zaki had heard that before.
Oh man, it's great every time, man.
Well, so I alluded to the idea that seeing the Enterprise again, particularly from the inside, it was legitimately emotional for me because, yes, obviously they're different sets. There's a different philosophy of the design that's associated with it. I still recognized it, and seeing that ship in that way, in such a heroic capacity, I was legitimately overcome with emotion. See, because it was like seeing an old friend again, with a new coat of paint, sure, but that was still the Enterprise. Like the design philosophy, particularly on the bridge. I mean, that chair is like a perfect reimagining, but still immediately recognizable. And I just loved seeing that ship again. On this show, we doubted a year ago whether or not the Enterprise would even appear, much less that we would see the interiors of it. Zaki, what was your reaction to seeing the Enterprise reimagined in this way?
I mean, it's just beautiful. I mean, what I love is that it's visually of a piece with the bridge from the original series, to the point where you believe that they are one and the same. You don't have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get there. You know, I mean, it a real effort was made to preserve the aesthetic, like you said, so that you're like, this is, I mean, they've gussied it up. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I wish the Kelvin Bridge had looked like that, you know?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
The Kelvin Enterprise Bridge, I should say, you know? And I think that's, and by the way, connected with that, am I imagining this? Because I haven't seen anybody mention this, but it sure looked to me like the way the Enterprise comes out of dry dock at the end, it looks like they've refitted it to look like the TOS
completely.
Yes.
Okay, because I haven't seen anybody online talk about that, and I'm like, is that just in my head? Okay, so
and that just goes back to the idea that they are making the extra effort to make things line up as is, at least as much as is feasible.
And here's another cool thing I thought, a little callback to the cage, which was the final shot when we're on the bridge of the Enterprise. We pull out through the top of the bridge dome, and then we see the Enterprise, which is exactly how we come in on the bridge in the cage.
I loved that.
It was cool.
Yeah. It was really great seeing that ship again. I mean, basically for the first time really since Star Trek 3. That was the Enterprise that ultimately gets destroyed to stay out of the hands of Commander Kruge and his crew. So
I truly feel like CBS they know how much fans loved Anson Mount in this role. They know it. It's the one thing everyone, regardless of how they feel about Discovery, can agree on is that the Pike stuff has been just on point. So they're not stupid. They've got a potential hit show in their back pocket. Of course they know. And I'm fairly certain that we will get an official announcement within the next 6 months. I truly feel like
they got to arrange to drive the dump trucks full of money up to Anson Mount's house.
Yes, that's really it. Those are the niggling details they have to work out. But I think it's going to happen.
Cicero, what do you think?
Yeah, when I saw the interior of the bridge, I was like, man, I can't wait until I'm watching the Pike Spock Enterprise, Enterprise show that's on CBS. It's got to happen. It's got to happen. There is, and even if it's a limited run series, it's got to happen. That if they decide to do 5 or 6 hour to hour and a half long episodes, and just say, all right, boom, here we go. This is it. Call it 1701 or something like that.
That would be a cool title. Star Trek 1701.
There you go, guys. It's another one from the hit factory that is Cicero Holmes.
Star Trek Enterprise 2.
right.
It also has
I want Pike's Place.
Pike's Place.
Pike's Place.
Yeah, so I mean, they've got to do it. They've got to do it. I mean, it's just they knew what they had when they casted him. And the response from the fans has been universally positive. So if they're in the business of making money, if they're in the business of trying to gain fans, which both of those things are true, they will definitely figure out a way to get Anson Mount, Ethan Peck, and Rebecca Romaine to romaine in those roles, so that they can do more with it, and potentially, Chris, give you what you've always wanted: a first name for number 1.
Hey. Well, so that's another thing too, because apparently they did.
He said,
really?
Somebody said that he said Una, and I don't know when.
Oh.
Una.
When?
So there was, I guess that it was mislabeled on the subtitles for the episode. So there's dispute among the embedded fans that the name was actually uttered on screen, but it looks like there was a point where Pike just said that Una has the con, and he calls her Una directly to her face. So, you know what? Actually, live peek behind the curtain. I'm going to look on Memory Alpha and see right now if they have actually settled that.
You mean you don't have this stuff just like consigned to memory, Chris? You know what? I quit. I quit this show. Forget it.
It says at the top of her Memory Alpha page, also informally known as Una. So apparently they said it, and that's right. Yeah,
Una meaning number one.
But that's in line with a name.
I love that game, Una.
Oh, yeah. There's even a notice at the top of the number one Memory Alpha page that it has been suggested this article be renamed to Una. You can discuss the suggestion on the talk page.
That's a fun talk page.
that would be fun to watch. But that's in line with what we've seen from her in some expanded universe materials. Most recently in the Desperate Hours novel, where she's a principal character. And I'm sure that they'll run with it in the Enterprise War, which is that upcoming novel about what the Enterprise was up to while everyone else was fighting the Federation Klingon War. But let me ask you guys a question, because when Discovery obviously first came into the fold, there were a lot of criticisms leveled by the embedded fans about what it was trying to do and how it was trying to fit into the continuity. Do you think a show that is ostensibly doing the same thing but is led by recognizable characters on a recognizable starship would have the same resistance attached to it? Zaki?
Wow. That's a really good question. I think that, when we look at the critiques that were lodged against Discovery at the start, we sort of have to pick through the sort of different tendrils, because there's like the anti-SJW crowd doing their crazy thing. There's also the pedantic continuity people who are like, what's the spore drive? Where are those uniforms from? What the hell? And then like, how come we didn't hear about Spock's sister and this and that? So I think that the Discovery people, and let's stipulate that there have been growing pains on this show. It's not like they went in with this end in mind. We know that there have been behind the scenes shuffling and stuff. So, I think there was a bit of a learning curve where maybe some of the folks involved earlier on didn't or misjudged just how much like canonical concerns would be a thing. But I think what we see, what season 2 has done, and especially what we see with, how they reimagined the Enterprise, how they reimagined those TOS era uniforms, is I think if you have something that feels visually of a piece, people will like. I don't think people want necessarily a recreation to the extent of like Trials and Tribulations or the mirror episodes of Enterprise. I don't think people want that necessarily. They just want something that feels like it could fit together. And I think that was the problem a lot of people had with some of the stylistic choices Discovery made. And I also want to say I was not one of those people. I was just like, all right, well, this is a thing. Fine. But and I would say that includes all of us on this panel. I'm genuinely curious how whether we four are indicative of the majority of Trek fans, like the silent majority, or is it more the pedantic continuity people who are more? I don't know. But circling back around to your initial question, Chris, I think the certainly the back half of season 2 has been a backdoor pilot for a potential Captain Pike show, and clearly people are on board with it. So I think whatever niggles people might have, I can't imagine those are going to be things. They when you think about it, they leaned right into, hey, here's what's going to happen to Captain Pike. We know it. So it's like there's no getting around that. And now it's like, okay, well, we've got this many years of adventures, and I think there's room for a modern day Star Trek show that's specifically engineered to evoke the feeling of
I would certainly love that. There's no question about that. No. That's exactly what I'm looking for. There is quite a gap between where we leave the characters at the end of Discovery season 2 and the transition of command from Pike to Kirk. There's
Can you imagine like a series finale? That's the finale. Wild. Like Captain Kirk on the bridge. We don't even see Captain Kirk. Or, I could see something really cool like that.
Cicero, what do you think about that question? Do you think this panel is indicative of that silent majority, like Cicero said, or like Zaki said?
Yeah. Oh, you just gave me a compliment.
or do you
the most backhanded compliment of all time? Right. Yeah. Well, I think like Rachel said, when you look to the internet as the litmus test, the barometer for not necessarily rational thought, but the barometer for taking the temperature of how fans think, or what people think about a particular thing. You're always going to miss the majority of people, because you're going to have people that are overwhelmingly positive about a thing. You're going to have people that are overwhelmingly negative about a thing. And those are going to be the people that are the most vocal, the people that like the thing and don't necessarily have anything demonstrative or explosive to say, are probably going to sit back and maybe observe the conversation around things, but not necessarily add anything to that conversation, because there's nothing that they can add to the conversation that is going to be, noteworthy in quotes. So I do believe that the people that most fans of Discovery are fans that are similar to us, that or most fans of the franchise are fans that are similar to us, that are able to appreciate what we're getting, able to appreciate what the writers are doing with this particular show, and are happy with the fact that, one, we've got new Trek, and two, that they're not destroying the thing that you love. They're only doing things to enhance your enjoyment of the thing that you love. With regards specifically to a new Enterprise series, or with regards to Star Trek 1701, as it will be titled.
You can send the check to Cicero Holmes.
Yes, care of Discovery Debrief, as popularized by Jason Isaacs. The thing that I think is that there is plenty of room, and I also do think that for the people that were vocal naysayers about Discovery, especially given its timeline, given the time in which it was set, and the stylistic choices that both cosmetically and technologically that the creators of the show made with Discovery, because of where it was set, wouldn't have those same issues with a Pike led with 1701, simply because all of those things are out the window. We know where the show ends, or we know the time frame that it can exist within. So that's already set. And the best part is we don't know anything else. We don't know anything else about, we know the cage, we know the menagerie, and we know nothing else about Pike and Number One and Spock's time with that crew. So they can have whatever adventures and misadventures they'd want to have within this show for however long they'd want to have them, without anyone really having a problem with them having those experiences, with the exception, of course, of doing things that Spock did, for the first time with Kirk and the crew of the TOS Enterprise. But outside of that, they've got plenty of space to do plenty of things, which is ironically enough, exactly where Discovery is right now.
Sure. Very well.
That's the alternate title for the Pike Show. Plenty of space to do things.
Right.
Well, I'll
Don't worry,
add,
we're good.
know, it's been a long time since there has been a Star Trek show led by a Starship Enterprise.
Yes.
And I mean, if we can get a new show that's led by the Enterprise, no bloody A, B,
Right.
C, or
Right.
D, or
Right.
E, I'd be all for it. But Rachel, what do you think? Oh, Zaki, please, yes.
I just when you said it's been a long time, I truly thought you were about to launch into singing the Enterprise song.
We are on a Star Trek podcast, sir.
What do I think, Chris?
About Pike Show, you think that it's an inevitability that it will be embraced by the fandom in a way that maybe Discovery has struggled to do, at least with a vocal minority?
Maybe it will. I mean, I don't know. I think probably the majority of fans are like us because I'm pretty sure, like I'm 100% sure we did mention pedantic continuity things, like
Yeah.
the Klingons, they don't look the same. Where's their hair? Like stuff like that.
And then they brought their hair back and brought the D7 back and then showed us the Bridge of the Enterprise.
Yeah, but I think like a person is not their pedantic. It's a person is not their emotions are not defined by the pedantic comments that they make. Like you have these thoughts. I think most people have these thoughts. Maybe they write them on the internet. Maybe they complain, but then they're not like sitting there all day, going to their job, just being like, oh, the uniforms, you guys. Like the Klingons, they don't have hair. Like, you do it.
There are holograms.
Yeah, you do it. You move on. You notice, but I don't but I don't know if noticing and being like, that kind of it doesn't make sense. Doesn't necessarily mean it's like bothering you on a constant visceral level or like really interfering with your enjoyment of the show. And I think there probably are people who are spending their days at work worrying about some of this stuff, but they are not the majority because most people are too busy for that.
I wish I had time to worry about this stuff. Honestly.
So
it's the whole notion of continuity in canon and the way it really does for some people it's a prison and for other people it's an opportunity, and I just certainly for me just as a fan, whenever I see something that seems to conflict with something that came before, reflexively I'm like, well, let's figure out how we can make it fit. That's just where my mind goes. I'm like, well, maybe this, maybe that. I don't know. It's there. It's part of it. So let's find a way. It's fine. And then you have other people like, oh, it doesn't fit. It doesn't count. And that itself is just so fascinating to me. It's like why close doors?
Well,
like if you don't want to watch it, that's
the potential too for a show that's led by Pike and the Enterprise and Spock also I think has more of an opportunity to pick up any of the remaining 23rd century threads that Discovery has now effectively left behind.
Sure.
I mean, the Section 31 show, I'm sure will go a little bit further in exploring some of those things. And, I'm sure that we'll see L'Rell again, potentially in that show. But if we could have a show that's led by the Enterprise, which could maybe even be canonized at this point in time as the Federation flagship, then I would love to see something like that. And that's just before you even get to the idea that Anson Mount's portrayal of Captain Pike has effectively become the definitive one, just by nature of how much time he spent with the role. Yeah. And I would certainly love to see that. Well,
and by the way, Chris, if Anson Mount never plays Captain Pike again, he has still created this amazing legacy where people think of him as one of the great Star Trek captains. And that's extra. I mean, I see it online all the time. I mean, my kid, Captain Pike, is so cool.
Wow. And would you have ever expected before you had any kids to hear your kids say that?
Yeah. That's a weird sentence. I wouldn't have expected.
So actually, Chris is emulating Captain Pike in his life. He has now started to say "hit it,"
Ah,
He doesn't even realize it, but I see it. I'm
I
like, all right,
do?
let's hit it. Like, you're...
Well,
all right.
he is a god among men.
Yes, there you go.
Worth emulating.
There you go. Before we go, Chris.
Yes,
and I know we're going to go real soon, but you mentioned it really quickly. What is everyone's thoughts on the potential of the Section 31 show now headed by Javeed Iqbal? Yeah.
Which is his dad's name. Did you guys know that?
But headed by now, I don't know, Commander Tyler. I don't even know what his name would be, like what his title is.
There are clearly some unresolved aspects of this season finale because it's a show that we know is going to be led by Michelle Yeoh.
Right.
And so we haven't seen, maybe she's even going to spend time on Discovery Season 3 and we'll see how she gets back to the 23rd century. Right. Presuming, I mean, maybe the show won't even be in the 23rd century. I honestly, I don't know, because the only cast member that I know that's confirmed for that show is Michelle Yeoh. But I'm still really interested in seeing more about what that organization was up to in other areas of the canon myself. Zaki, what do you think? Are you up on Section 31?
I mean, what we know is that, what they've done now is essentially reduced Section 31 to where it's supposed to be by the point of, Deep Space Nine. However, I mean, by the time of Deep Space Nine, it's still like a shady, sketchy organization. It's just kind of on the low. So my thought is, if they're like, all right, Ash, we want you to like fix this thing and make it work. It's like, well, did he fail then?
I mean, I would love an anthology Section 31 show. Like, oh, hey, it was Section 31 that orchestrated the assassination of Chancellor Gorkon, or stuff like that. They're not going to do that, but I would like to see it. Rachel, Section 31, you optimistic? How do you feel?
I don't know. I feel confused. Well, I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Well, then, and that's I think a good way to close out this episode, because just
I feel confused.
Well, no, just because the show is called Discovery Debrief, but I think the plan for all of us is to stick with whatever forms the Star Trek franchise takes going forward. Yes. We all enjoy getting together. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. And we have new elements of this franchise to explore. I don't think we plan on renaming the show. Like All-Access Debrief or something stupid like that. But
now that Jason Isaacs has said
we can't
our
ever
name,
change the name. But hey, we've been anointed.
The word of Lorca. That's it.
By Gabriel Lorca. But no, I mean, I think that whatever form this franchise takes, as long as people enjoy hearing what we have to say about Star Trek, we're going to talk about Star Trek. Does that sound good to you guys?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Can I add one more observation about the episode? I wanted to say this before we drop. And this is something I think I mentioned to Cicero last week off mic, but at the end of this episode, as Michael is preparing to leave, and she gives Spock her last advice as his older sister, and she says, find that person who is just the exact opposite of you and go towards them, let them be your guide. An incredibly emotional, poignant moment. I was watching it with my kid, my 10-year-old. He looks at me, he's like, oh, she's talking about Captain Kirk. Which I love that people know the Spock-Kirk relationship enough to know that. But here's the other thought I had, and this is how canon can be this amazing thing that stretches forward and retroactively and becomes this amazing tapestry. To me, what I love is here is Spock at the beginning of his journey getting this advice that will define who he is. And then we jump ahead, to the very end of his life as he's in an alternate timeline. And he meets himself in a timeline where he never knew Michael Burnham. And he gives himself that exact advice in Star Trek 2009. And so that bit now, when you watch it in the 2009 movie, we now have this added context. He's passing on this thing that was given to him by his sister.
And we didn't have that context
True.
in 2009 because that piece
Yeah.
of continuity never existed.
It just blew
And
my
I don't
mind,
know.
Jackie.
I love that. I love that. That's how.
Like, whoa.
No, it's true though, and maybe one of the writers of the 2009 movie being associated with Discovery has something to do with that. But either way, that is one of the absolute strengths of having continuity. You're absolutely right in weaving that tapestry.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, when with the Kelvin movies, they didn't just do like a Battlestar Galactica and just ignore everything. They said, no, we're going to find a way to make this connect. And so even the rebooted Star Trek is part of this tapestry. And that's what I love about it.
Either way, I think we're all looking forward to seeing what forms the Star Trek franchise takes in the future, because really, and I had no idea that this was going to be the case when we started this show, but Discovery is clearly a first step into more and bigger exploitations in this universe that we all love. And I'm really looking forward to going on that journey with you guys. But that is going to do it. So I think the plan for the next episode, obviously Star Trek Discovery is all finished. We'll probably have a recap episode at some point that kind of goes over the entire season. We have some promises to keep when it comes to guests of this show, making either a first appearance or a return appearance. And we're going to have a lot to talk about between now and I think the next show that we're going to talk about is the Picard show that's still slated to premiere later this year. So, but until we meet again, so the next time we'll probably be giving you a debrief, taking a little bit of a detour into the Marvel Cinematic Universe by giving you our perspectives on Avengers Endgame. But until then, that's going to do it for episode number 41 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you'd be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you wrote a review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it's posted. Speaking of which, Debrief is engaged into a partnership with the developers of officially licensed browser-based game Star Trek Alien Domain Incursion. Send us proof of your review of the show on social media or via email, and we'll send you a key code that's worth approximately $60 of in-game items. It's that simple. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles, and feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us directly at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes discussing the wide, great tapestry that is Star Trek, and be sure to join us as we convene next time to discuss quite a different pop culture topic, but we'll be getting to a whole lot more Star Trek as we prepare for what comes next. As always, though, until we meet again, please go boldly, my friends.